Making round symmetrical shapes on the wheel is great, but it's also pretty easy to change the shapes of what you make. This is a simple small bowl that I threw a couple of days ago, and it's firmed up just a little bit so I can handle it, pick it up without totally messing it up, but it's soft enough that I can still flex it. So I could take this round bowl and pretty easily squeeze it into an oval shape, which might be nice if you wanted to make bowls that were elongated. Sometimes oval shapes actually fit nicer onto tables and in cabinets. This could be a nice shape if you wanted to rest a spoon in one side. You could also take an oval or something round and pretty easily turn it into something square. So I'm just pressing with my hands on all four sides. Obviously the walls still need to be pretty soft in order to do this. If it's too dry and I squeeze too hard, I'm gonna start to crack the rim in places around it. Especially the rim might be too dry if it's very thin, and that can be kind of common at this stage. I could come and start to even define these corners even more. But while I'm doing all of this manipulating and stretching, at the same time, I'm being very sensitive to how dry this is and how much pressure and pushing it can take without cracking. You could further define the sides of this by hitting on it with a piece of wood. And I could use this to help define the corners more sharply if I wanted to also. I really like what changing the shape to the walls does to the rim also. I like the way the rim arcs up now. I'm also thinking that these four sides are going to be nice areas where I could put a distinct image or some kind of decoration that is framed by this new shape of the wall I've created. Again, all of this depends on the piece being just the right degree of cheese hard. I'm gonna call this early to middle cheese hard. It's a little softer than cheddar cheese. I'm inspired by the way the rim arcs up now on these four sides since I squared it. And if the piece is just the right stiffness, you can even come and cut into the rim to give a different sort of a shape. I feel like I want to exaggerate this arcing quality. I'm just using my sharp metal knife that came in my toolkit, and I'm cutting slivers and slices off. Don't cut too much at first. You can always cut more, but it's really hard to reattach if you've cut too much. I want to even out this curved line that I've cut into the rim, so I'm using the edge of the metal knife here kind of like a scraping tool to shave off any last bumps and make this curved line on the rim seem more flowing and continuous without any glitches in it from where I cut to where I didn't, so that it just looks like one continuously flowing curve coming across the top of the piece. And then, of course, I want to finish this smoothly. I don't want it to look like I scraped it. I don't even want it to look like I cut it with the knife. I want it to have that soft, finished, compressed, polished look that a rim can have right when you're done throwing it on the wheel. So I'm going to start by coming around just with my fingertips, and I'm pressing the grog back into the clay, and I'm smoothing over all those little grit marks and the coarse texture that you can get from cutting and scraping into the clay. And I'm smoothing it and polishing it. I'm also using the sides of my thumb and my finger to press on the square corners of the edge that I made when I cut it, and I'm rounding it to make it more look like what we know you can achieve with a wheel thrown rim. And now I'm using wet fingertips, and I'm going to go around this rim and smooth it and polish it and round it and make it look finished. I want this piece to have a nice gleaming edge to it, and I want the edge to catch the end user's attention. I want the user's eye to come to the edge, stay there, and to keep their eye engaged going around and around the piece. The edge is what people are going to see first. That's where their eye enters the piece. And with this piece, I want the viewer's eye to come on that edge, stay on the edge, travel around the piece, and hopefully that will lead them down into the bowl. I'm starting to do a little more manipulating and in and out with this. Since I've gotten it wet a little bit on the rim just with my fingertips, it's softened up to the point where I can push it in and out more. So what started with a piece that I was just gonna change from a simple round bowl into a simple square bowl now is becoming more fluted back and forth. I cut the rim to exaggerate that quality, and I'm pushing out on the four corners now to have it reach out into space more. So I've turned this pretty simple bowl into something that's, I think, a lot fancier. It's almost more like a presentation bowl now. Something that might be used to serve, a really fancy dessert, let's say. This could certainly be the start of a series of work that I wanted to make. Pretty simple alterations can have a really dramatic effect on the piece. This back and forth, in and out, pushing and pulling on the clay falls into a general area of alterations that we call fluting the piece. You can think of like a fluted pie crust going around. There's lots of different ways to do fluting techniques. This is one way of going about it. I'm going to show you some other ways now. This is a slightly larger amount of clay. It's probably about 4 pounds. And I'm doing the last couple pulls, really focusing on getting the clay up from the bottom. It's always going to be heavier on the bottom, and you're always trying to pull that clay up in the air. I like to throw looking down on the rim, kind of a bird's eye view, and I like to try and see the cross section of the piece while I'm throwing without having to literally cut it in half. So I have kind of one eye on the inside contour and one eye on the outside contour, and I'm looking at how thick the clay wall is while I'm pulling the material up. I mean, I can see how much thicker the wall is down here. I can see the thickness or the distance in between my inside and outside finger, and I can see how thin it is right here. So while I'm throwing, I keep my eye trained on that cross section to remind myself how much material I really need to pull up in the air. And right down here, I need to gather up quite a bit, and throughout this whole bottom half of the piece, I need to keep my firm clench on, and now I'm being more gentle, and that's bringing the clay from the bottom up to the top. I'm going to use the rib on the outside of the piece to help control the shape a bit. I notice down here it's more of a straight wall, and then there's a curve, and then it kind of flares out, but there's actually not one continuous curve like I want to have on this piece. So I'm going to hold the rib in a curve using the side edge of the index finger of my left hand. I'm going to push the clay wall into my rubber rib. I'm holding the rubber rib in my right hand. My fingers are right up close on the edge of it, and my left hand is gently pushing the clay wall into that shape. I'm going to come up towards the top and gently release pressure, and now I'm going to use it backwards and go from the rim back down. And I'm going to slowly and steadily trace over the curve that I want to have. I'm going to use the rib on the inside too. I'm starting at the rim very lightly. It's just gliding through the rib right now. And as I come down towards the middle section, I'm starting to clench up my grip a little bit. And now I'm down in the lower third of the piece in the transition zone between the floor and the wall. In here, I've really got a firm grip on the tool. I'm compressing the floor right into the bullseye. And as I approach the bullseye, I gently release pressure. You need to watch out that the bowl doesn't flare too abruptly off of the stump of support underneath the curve. There's a real tendency right here, about an inch or so up in the air, right where the wall starts to curve away from the floor, for that initial spreading curve out to happen too abruptly and your piece to collapse. So you need to make sure right in this bottom area that it's a gradual curve. Sometimes bowls can be more about the inside of the form. Sometimes they can be more about the volume and the capacity and how much they can hold. Sometimes bowls are more about the outside of the form. Sometimes they're more about the profile and the contour and the shape that way. Sometimes they're more about holding stuff in, and sometimes they're more about giving stuff out. Sometimes they're a good balance between inside and outside in the importance of those two areas. I like to think about the inside space, the capacity, the outside profile, the contour shape of it, and the rim. Before I do any fluting on this rim, I'm going to go ahead and polish it smooth with my little piece of plastic bag here. Fold it in half and get a clean folded edge, and I'm going to cup this over the rim at 3 o'clock and gently press down, just a slight amount of pressure here, and I'm polishing and smoothing and really rounding off that top edge. And now with clean fingers, I'm going to push the edge back and forth like a pie crust. I'm going to use my left hand to hold it in place and my right index finger to push out. I like fluting because I just like playing with the clay in a wet state. I like how it reveals so much about the nature of clay. I feel like pushing and pulling on fresh wheel thrown stuff is a way to share some of the joy we experience while throwing with the people who get to use our pieces. You're kind of showing them how soft and malleable the clay is. It also directly leaves your touch in the clay. It's a really nice way to get a sense of rhythm in your work. I think I want this to flare out just a bit more. This will also make a really nice area to melt glazes over, and glazes will catch in each one of those divots and pool towards the center of the piece. So fluting at the rim is really fun and easy. You can also do other kinds of fluting in the side area of the bowl. I'm going to push out on the wall of clay from the inside with the knuckle of my right index finger. In order to do this, you need to make sure that the clay is just at the right consistency, just the right firmness or softness, and that it's also just the right thickness or thinness. So as I'm doing these fluting moves, I'm also assessing those factors. And my sense of touch, of how the clay is responding, is influencing the pressure that I'm applying while I'm doing it. So I'm going to start down at the bottom, and then in a curved line, I'm going to swoop my knuckle up to the top. Now I'm going to turn the piece and do it again. The clay is a little soft right now for my taste. I probably should have let this sit up for an hour or so, and then I'd have a lot more control. They're not quite as evenly spaced around the piece as I would have liked, but it's okay. That's one reason why I want you all to work in a series format, so that you can learn some of the idiosyncrasies of your particular altering technique and work within them to actually overcome some of those, or have a degree of control with some of those particularities of your altering technique. The first time that you try and alter your piece in a particular way to manipulate it, is not going to come out exactly like how you imagine it might. It's going to be a learning experience. And you're going to need to do it several times and learn more each time. I'm using the sponge on the inside to go back over the lines a little bit. I felt like they were a little too sharp, maybe a little too narrow, and so I'm softening them and widening them with the sponge. I've learned a lot about this altering technique just from doing it. I've learned that maybe it's better to wait an hour or so and have the clay be a little firmer. I've learned maybe if I want it to be more even, I could have started in a different way in how I applied the fluting technique. I like it, but I know the next time I try this, it'll be improved. And that's why I'm asking you to make a related series of work, to force yourself to practice and improve, to learn about the particularities of your individual altering technique. Whatever it is that you're bringing to your pieces, you're gonna learn by doing. The first time you try it, it's not gonna come out exactly like how you envision, but over time, over your related family of work, you're gonna get closer and closer. And your idea about it is gonna develop over time also. Maybe I feel like now there's too many little flutes going around the rim and it's a little too busy for me. And I like that in the base I only have 6 as opposed to 16 up here at the top. So I'm getting closer to my own particular style as well and developing that too. I want to try and push these flutes out as much as I can without collapsing the piece. I also really like how fluting makes a connection between the inside and the outside of the piece. I mean, you can obviously literally see what's pushing out from the inside, its effect on the exterior of the bowl. And I really like that play back and forth between those two areas of the piece. This is a pretty big piece and it's pretty soft and fragile right now. So I'm not gonna slide it off of the bat until it's more firm, but I am gonna run my wire under there. Before I do that, I'm gonna use the wood tool and I'm gonna make a little bit of a sharp edge down at the bottom, right where the clay hits the bat. I'm gonna run my wire underneath it just to loosen it a bit so it can breathe, but I'm not gonna slide it off the bat. Another fun option for making your pieces unique is to use underglazes on them. You can use underglazes on the wet clay. This piece is medium cheese hard, and I put this band of blue underglaze on about 45 minutes ago, and I let the underglaze get semi-stiff also so that I can touch it and not leave a fingerprint on it. Now I can carve back into it and I'll get not just the carving line, but I'll get that color difference as I carve through the blue and expose the white clay underneath. This carving back through a color technique is known as sgraffito. And sgraffito is a decorating technique from ancient Greek pottery where they only had red and black clay. Here I have white and a blue color on top, but this sgraffito technique, or exposing the different colored clay body underneath, also looks great if you're using the red clay or any color underglaze with a contrasting color of clay. So I'm thinking about my decoration a little bit before I go ahead and do it. And I'm using a shish kebab skewer. You could use a pencil tip. If you have a small carving tool, there's a whole variety of different tools you could use, which would be another great thing to practice. If you wanted to do this sgraffito technique, you could practice using a variety of different tools and see what different kinds of line quality they give you. I'm going to do kind of a curved line on here. And now I'm going to put leaves on the sides of this vine. There's an immediacy to the sgraffito technique. Actually, the word sgraffito has the same root as the word graffiti. And it basically translates into meaning mark making. So I always think of sgraffito as a way to leave my mark or put my graffiti onto the piece. Here's a piece I threw a couple of days ago, and I'm going to come now and cover the outside bottom part with green underglaze. And I'm going to let that underglaze stiffen up for, it might only take about 30 minutes till it's not tacky anymore, and then I can carve into that. You can also use underglazes on the piece right while you're throwing. With this piece, I like how it gently curves in towards the top. I like how that might help to keep the food that's going to go in this bowl warm. And so I'm going to use some warm underglaze colors on the outside. The underglaze is going to be the last thing I put on here, so I want to finish the rim before I apply any colors. I have some orange underglaze here, or I think in your glaze kit it's called deep yellow, but it fires to pretty much the same color as what you see in the container. It does get a little bit darker in the firing. I like the kind of energy and speed that you can communicate on the surface by moving your brush up and down at different rates. I like the kind of casual quality this has to it now. And now I'm kind of mixing the red and the yellow in the center area. So that's kind of a nice fade effect. And I can go back and forth with the two different colors. With an effect like this on a piece, of course I would choose to just go over that area with a clear glaze. And I could put a different color glaze on the inside if I wanted to. I might want to play that up by using our bright red glaze on the inside, or maybe using a black glaze on the inside. But I'm already thinking about that and how I'm gonna use different glazes to complete the piece. I'm gonna do a different kind of carving or different kind of sgraffito on this piece and just use the carving tool from my toolkit and make a series of vertical lines in the piece. The underglaze is still a little wet, so I'm trying to be careful not to have the shavings that come off of my carving tool glom stick on the surrounding area. If I let this stiffen up for another little bit, it would be easier. Those are the kinds of little things you learn by practicing the technique over and over again. Timing. I really like the marks that are left by carving in like this, and I also kind of wish the clay wall was a little bit thicker so that I could carve in a little bit deeper, but I'm scared I'm going to cut through. And that's another thing I might change when I try this technique again on a second piece, is to intentionally leave the wall a little thicker there so that I could really carve these in deeply. I'm feeling the wall thickness with my left fingers inside also, and I can feel when I'm getting close to cutting through, which I don't want to do. I know with more practice I'll be able to carve down with more confidence, but I know it'll get better every time I try and make another piece in the same way. When you have a piece that's really smooth and fat and round like this, it's so tempting to push into the surface. It's kind of like pushing in on a balloon. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with this piece and just push in with my thumb Kind of give the piece like a belly button on one side. Now I'm going to come and do that on the opposite side also. I'm going to just visually line up and push in right here. I'm feeling the clay wall with my other hand on the inside to make sure I don't poke a hole through by mistake. And now I'm going to go ahead and do that in some other areas of the piece and make a pattern that maybe makes this look like a little quilted pillow. I really like how this technique looks on the inside of the piece, how you can see every one of those little divots I've made telescoping through the clay wall on the inside. So I really encourage you all to bring some personality to your work, to try touching the clay, moving it off of round, to experiment pushing into the clay wall with your hands or using other tools to push or pull, to think about maybe bringing color into your piece or drawing on the clay or carving into the clay. These are all great ways that you can make a related family of work.